Hi there. Had a fascinating 3 days actually in Amsterdam. I'm back in the hotel now. And I spoke yesterday at the High Tech conference, particularly on the subject of data science. Some of the questions we had from the audience afterwards were quite pertinent, but one of the ones that stood out for me is basically the process of data science itself. And I think one of the things that jumped out at me was the fact that people are still unaware in so many ways of of how to process that and go through the framework and actually understand how you get from framing a problem to getting insights. So I think what I'd like to do is to just take you through probably 6 steps very quickly. The first one is really about framing the problem. Ask yourself a lot of questions. Test the problems that you're thinking about. Don't just go for the data, but really frame it, make it into a concrete, well-defined problem, and match that problem with a business priority or part of your strategic objectives. If you don't have anything that's linked to a purpose, then sometimes I think it will just derail what you're trying to do. The second thing is go out and collect the data. Now I think you've got to identify, based on what the actual problem is, a set of data sets that you need to go and source, and those data sets might be internal or they might be external. And make sure you can extract that data into usable formats. And I think most data sets, whether they be internal from your internal systems, should be pretty easy to download into different formats like CVS and XML or Excel files, etc. But if you have to get it from specific data sets, you can't integrate it into a data lake or a warehouse, then try and get it down into different formats that you can then play around with. The next thing you've got to do, the third point, is really processing that data. So think about identifying the errors that you've got in that data, identify any corrupt records, identify any missing values that you will then need to add and clean the data. So making sure you throw away the bad stuff, replace it with the good data at least, and make sure that any missing values or errors are taken care of and it's cleansed. Because as data scientists out there, I think you probably realize that most of your time is spent cleansing data. So the next thing, right, I think, is really to explore that data, load it, explore it, split it, segment it, and look at it in different ways. Now, I'm coming from a background of leading data projects and working with data science, so it's often the conversations I have with the data scientists. But I think it's here where you start to identify different trends, different variables in the actual data. And I think the next step is, once you've done that, then you can start to create those statistical models, whether what kind of predictive model you're building, and start to evaluate it and refine it and start to test it and start to really understand what the algorithm is doing and train that algorithm, but make sure you've got a really good data set, as I said before, and you're training it on a really decent set of data. And I think that the last thing that I would do is, once you've got that you've performed that analysis and you've done that in depth, you've built that predictive model or whatever it is that you're doing, I think is then to take those and to visualize that, put it into something that's going to be of value to a business person. And don't, a business person is going to want to see something that's credible and meaningful to them. Put it into a visual platform, visualize the data, make sure that it's simple, it conveys that particular message that you're trying to give them, and it ties back to that business problem to make sure that you've understood and framed the problem, you've gone and got all the data and done all of your in-depth analysis, and you've come back and you've communicated those results in a very clear and succinct manner. So you can tell the story, and you can provide an action set that the user needs to do. Now, I think there's 2 things that data science completes. Is one, a data scientist can help a business to validate a business case. Or obviously the second thing that a data scientist can do is actually start to perform those, write those predictive models and to get that value and those insights and create that, data which is sitting there and probably, not really being used much, but turn it into value. Create something that is going to drive revenue, increase operational efficiencies, or, get your products to market quicker. So I think those are the 6 things. So it's framing the problem, making sure you've got the right data, processing that data, cleaning it, and then exploring it, and in particular creating those algorithms and making sure that you're testing and learning that over time, and then communicating those results. So I just wanted to talk about that because it's one of the questions that came up, and I think it's something that I've been asked quite a bit. So over and out from me in Amsterdam at the end of the conference, and I have had a great time at High Tech this year. And I look forward to next year, and have a great weekend, everybody. Speak to you next week. Bye now.